Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. As always, this is your host, Stuart Cranes, and this is your inside track to success. Have another amazing guest for you this week. And before I introduce her, as always, please subscribe, please share this with somebody. The cost of admission is totally free. So just do us a favor, help us grow the show, help us get this information out to as many people as possible so that we can create the biggest possible impact for those tuning in. Now, I'm super excited to invite this guest on. She's somebody that I haven't known very long, admittedly, but she's somebody that through her presence, through her energy, her personality, lights up a room, lights up a space, and more importantly, she has some super specialized education and knowledge to share with the world. So she is the owner and CEO of Legacy Pregnancy. She is a PhD holder in endocrinology and reproductive physiology from University of Wisconsin at Madison. And quite frankly, y'all, even though her specialty is pregnancy and fertility, she can help with just about anything as it relates to wellness and the human body. I think she's amazing. I know you're going to love her too. Please welcome Dr. Rae Dahn on the show. Thank you for being here, Dr. Rae.
Oh, thank you so much, Sue. I'm a huge fan of your show, so it's so fun to be behind the scenes with you.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And, I wanted to just kick this off. I mean, what you do is so specific. And I think it's a
Yeah.
really beautiful, really important niche in the healthcare industry, just as a whole. So I'd love for you to maybe just kick this off, explain how you got into reproductive health, which I know is a very broad umbrella term that I'm using. But
Yeah.
share that with the audience and maybe some more of the specifics on what you do because you're going to be able to explain it infinitely better than I can.
Absolutely. So this is really pretty much wrapped into my story. So if you're okay, I'll just kind of guide us through. All right. So my story began I've been doing research for over 13 years. So I've always loved research. I've always loved science. And that has always been kind of my thing. And then on April 8th in 2017, I was in a life-altering car accident.
Mm.
And we were heading home from a research conference. We had just gone to Butler and we were on our way home. I was in the back of a 16-person van. And the person behind us, we still to this day don't really know what happened, if she was texting and driving or what, but she smashed into the van. The van flipped up on its front wheels and then landed on top of her car. And so
Mm.
from that, I received a traumatic brain injury and I couldn't read or write after the accident. And I began on this really long healing journey. I was
Wow.
plagued with migraines, had a personality shift, just all sorts of things that I was going through. And I noticed when we were going through this, actually, initially, it was my husband who really noticed that what I was learning from the neurologist and all the stuff that they had me on, it just wasn't working. I was getting worse and worse and worse, and it just was becoming not sustainable. And so that really launched us into learning about other methods. So I got hooked up with optometrist who specialized in post-concussive syndrome, and I started doing occupational therapy, and they introduced me to a lot of different eating styles that would help with my migraines. And it really just kind of sparked this whole journey into acupuncture and Reiki and
Mhm.
craniosacral therapy. And, so now that we're how many ever years down the line, I have kind of like a regular regimen that I go through that has really helped me. And through that whole process, we realized, whoa, there's this huge gap between what the data and what the science is showing us as far as neurology and what you can do to help yourself versus what you're being taught by your provider. And when I was going through graduate school, I saw the same exact thing between OB-GYNs and their clients, whether or not it be related to fertility or choices in pregnancy or beyond. And so many of these things, it's just kind of getting swept under the rug because either providers don't have enough time to teach their patients what's going on, or there's just that gap and they don't necessarily know what the newest data and research is showing. And so when I saw all that going on, I realized, whoa, I want to help fix this problem. So I went and got my health and wellness certification in the preconception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum stages while I was getting my PhD, because I knew there's got to be a solution to this, and it's not in the traditional way.
Yeah.
So I went and got that so that way I could help people understand and help facilitate motivated and sustainable behavior change. So that paired with everything I learned in graduate school, I help families, whether or not they're in the infertility or fertility space, pregnancy, birth space, or postpartum. I'm able to go in and provide one-on-one custom support. So whether that is about their improving fertility naturally. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to improve your fertility, actually by over 80%. And it's not shared, unfortunately. And when I was in graduate school, this really killed me. So as I was going through my health and wellness training, you have to do so many coaching hours for free to become a
Hmm.
coach. And so, I reached out to the OB-GYNs who are part of the fertility clinic at the hospital where I was as a graduate student. And I said, hey, I have so many hours that I have to do for free. What if I met with all of your fertility clients and we could kind of run like a little study on it, and we could see what kind of different rates we could get by implementing these behavioral and lifestyle changes. And every single one of the fertility experts, always said, nope, that's not what we do. That's not what we do. And I said, well, wait a minute. Are you in the business of helping people get pregnant? They said, well, we just do IVF. That's beyond our scope. That's not what we do. And
Wow.
so we had many conversations, and it just, yeah, it breaks your heart when you get down
Hmm.
into it. And so, through that, I really realized, through my education originally, I was thinking I'll go and work at a fertility clinic. I'll be their in-house endocrinologist, and I could kind of do both. And after doing that and kind of reaching out to people, I realized, you know what? Maybe I'm not supposed to work in-house. Maybe I'm supposed to be separate, because I'm not going to be tied to the same mantras and philosophies and everything, that universities and the healthcare system, get swept into. So I can kind of be that third party independent person to help look at the data for what it really means and not be impacted by what my hospital is telling me that it should mean, etc.
Sure.
So that has been really neat. So no matter what phase people are at, I can provide that one-on-one custom support, whether it's through my online courses or online coaching. And I also have group coaching too. So whatever kind of support people are looking for. And I also do on call, so people can message me. I love it. About a month ago, I had someone message me at 3 a.m. asking me about sperm, which is just so fun.
Wow.
So yeah, you never know when you're going to have a question about sperm. So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell, and how I came to do what I do.
I love that. And thank you so much for sharing that. And, you know, in my own personal health journey, maybe not my reproductive journey necessarily, but just in my health journey,
Yeah.
I have actually had to rely on methodologies outside of the traditional medical system in order to heal things that were
Yeah.
wrong with me at the time. I've had SIBO before,
Oh,
which for the
yeah.
people listening who don't know what that is, it's an invasive, basically accumulation of bacteria that starts to line your gut and it makes you super tired and you feel
Yeah.
like you have mono even though you're
Yeah.
otherwise fine in quotes.
Oh, don't get me started on you're fine.
And it's one of those things where I'm not going to knock the medical system as it stands in its entirety, because there's a lot of great people out there doing a lot of great
Absolutely.
work. However, it's not everything necessarily. And this is why I wanted to have you on, Dr. Ray, because I feel like you understand all the sides of it. And I guess in the broadest sense, the question I want to ask you is, what is your advice for somebody, whether it be in the reproductive space or elsewhere,
Mhm.
where they've sought this traditional medical attention, they're not getting the results they need, they're not improving appreciably. What is your advice for them starting to seek specialist help such as what you provide, or whatever that might look like?
Excellent question. So I think first and foremost, listen to your body. and look within. And listening to your body can be a really difficult thing in today's day and age. We have so many distractions, and it can be really hard to hear what our bodies are trying to tell us. But if your body is telling you there's something going on and there's something wrong, there absolutely is.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many times where people are told by, their provider that their labs are normal or they're fine, and they'll go on for years. I actually just had a client who's been dealing something for 10 years, and we just got her extensive lab work back. And it's one of those things where I literally spent over 16 hours going over her lab work, just her lab work, going over creating, this is what these pathways mean. This is what you can do to help your system right now. And she even is working with a functional med provider, and they missed two huge things from it just because they didn't have the same time. And they're a great physician, and that's not what I'm trying to say at all. It's just our system is not set up for specialized one-on-one care. And after going through all that, she's finally able to start healing on this long journey. But, her 10 years ago kept being told, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. So it's someone who is in the beginning of their journey. One, know that you're not alone, that there's a huge group of people out there, not just me, who, one, would love to listen, hear what you've got going on. Two, education is a huge piece. So just start reading up on what you've got going on, whether or not it's chronic inflammation or if it's sleep. Everything is so interconnected with our bodies. Usually, we always like to say that everything starts in the gut, which is usually pretty true. There are a few exceptions, but pretty much if your gut isn't functioning normal, the rest is going to spiral out of control. It might not be right away, but over time it will. So looking at the gut is a great first place to start for someone who's trying to figure it out. And, looking at processed foods and sugar, those are two huge things. If you can kind of start thinking of sugar as poison, which I know that's pretty crazy to say in our country. And I'm not perfect. This isn't an all or nothing thing. But as you're looking into it and you're starting to learn all about it, just knowing that it's a problem. So, knowing you're not alone, knowing, start to educate yourself. And then 3, I think just reach out to me, reach out to other people in the community who are experiencing what you're going through, because there's probably someone who's gone through it before you and who can really help and pass down the info. What I found, just as you were saying, other people who've gone through non-traditional healing methods they're usually so supportive and want to help and share the information that they've learned, and for free, and I love connecting people. For example, whether or not it's in the fertility space or not, I love connecting people with providers, with doulas, whoever it is, because even if they end up not working with me, that's okay. I want people to feel better. That's what matters. And if I could have helped myself, 7 years ago, it would have totally changed my world. So I'm just trying to pay it forward to the people who helped me. So yeah, just know you're not alone. And there's a lot of people out there who would love to walk through the journey with you.
Thank you for sharing that. And we're 100% going to make sure Dr. Rae's contact info is made readily available as a part of this episode. And more on that later. However, you mentioned checking in with your gut. How does somebody actually do that to get started on checking in with their gut?
Yeah. So, all right. There's so many different things you can do. So generally, it depends on what route you want to go. Do you want to do the testing or the non-testing route? Some people who I come in contact with, they want to know exactly what it is that's happening in their gut and then attack it that way. And then other people that I meet are, for example, one of my most recent fertility couple graduates. They didn't really want to go into the whole testing piece because they knew they needed to make these huge behavioral and lifestyle shifts, and that they were okay with making the shifts, understanding these things are going to improve regardless of what the starting labs were. So it just depends on who you are. Some people like to know the numbers ahead of time, in which case there are some awesome functional medicine tests that you can get ahead of time. For example, the GI map is really awesome, and it can tell you exactly what you've got going on. And if you're more interested in just the natural route, then generally limiting or eliminating processed foods, sugar, And then caffeine is another big one. I know I've probably lost already most people.
Oh, you
Like,
lost me
I'm
at
out of here.
caffeine.
I know. You guys are like, no way. Yeah, I know. It's a tough one. But actually switching out and focusing on things like lemon ginger tea and having a warm cup before every meal is actually really good for boosting your hydrochloric acid, and it's awesome for digestion and your immune health. So if you can swing it, lemon ginger tea is great. So adding, just kind of trying to get back to nature as much as you can. And, simple things of just paying attention to what you eat and how it makes you feel.
Yeah.
So always going back and checking with your body and how do you feel. In our country, there was a huge switch in the type of wheat that is grown, and that was done about 50 years ago. And they did
Hmm.
it without doing any digestive tests, which if they would have done the tests ahead of time, they would not have done it. So most people in America cannot properly digest the wheat that is in all of our products because it's this new wheat that is harder to digest. So if you're struggling with inflammation, that's a huge thing.
Does that have anything to do with gluten, or is it just
Yes.
the
Yeah.
wheat?
So
Okay.
it's the gluten itself. Yep. Depending on what type of wheat it is, so there's emmer wheat, there's red wheat, and then there's like the traditional European wheat. The traditional European wheat, the gluten that's in that, almost everyone can digest it, unless you have true celiacs, in which case that's its own boat. But in today's day and age in America, pretty much any wheat, most people are gluten sensitive to that wheat because it just sits in your gut like a rock, and over
Mm.
time it causes all sorts of issues. I won't even go into that. That's a whole other podcast. But yeah, it's really not doing your gut any favors, and it's also not doing your immune system any favors. So if you have some low lying things, eliminating gluten can really help. And it usually takes between 3 and 4 months to get it out of your system.
Oh,
And then
wow.
you could yeah. So you have to commit, and then you can try it for like a day and then see how you feel. And most people will immediately oh my gosh, I felt horrible and I didn't even know. So that's really interesting. So that's one thing to look at. Also evaluate dairy. Do you have a dairy sensitivity that maybe you didn't know about? So things like that, just being aware of what you've got going on and just leaning into the things that you find that make you feel good.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. I am somebody who has dietary restrictions, like, I'm straight up allergic to dairy.
Okay. Yeah.
People are like, "Oh, you're lactose intolerant?" I'm like, "No, I will break out in hives and go to sleep." Like
Ooh.
it's pretty bad. But, on the less dramatic, let's say, examples, I am currently on a stretch where I have committed to this coaching program that I'm a part of currently. I am not going to consume any alcohol of any kind until that's
Yay.
over
Oh my gosh.
around the beginning of May.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I am about 3 weeks in, haven't had any alcohol in that time, and I feel clearer. I sleep better. I do notice that I have more sustained energy for a longer period of time. I also do actually feel like I am digesting food better.
Oh, that's
And,
amazing.
like, my libido's higher, which might be
Woo-hoo.
TMI for some people listening. But,
That's my world.
um, right, right, right. So I figured this was the right place to say
It's
it.
spot on.
But, so anybody listening to this, yes, we do get to be committed. Yes, we do get to sacrifice certain things, but think of it, instead of what are you giving up and what are you losing, think of, you're giving up something okay to good for something much, much better, which is your health.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, 100%. I'm so glad you said that because we can get into a mindset of something is being taken away from me.
Mhm.
And that is always such a dark place to be in, and usually things don't last that long when you're in that mindset. Um, I have done twice now. I've done a year of sobriety, and in the second year that I did, I was the healthiest I'd ever been in my life. As you said, so much clarity. Um, Everything just felt like it was functioning better. And it turns out you don't have to have alcohol to have a good time.
Imagine that.
You would think, but you know what, I learned that you don't. So yeah, so that was amazing. And in the second year that I did, I actually did yoga every day. It was like at least 5 minutes of yoga every day, and it
Wow.
turns out that that also was totally transformative. And so I think if we can kind of set ourselves up and frame it in a way of, I'm choosing to do this for whatever your underlying why is, if it's for your family, for your kids, or if it's truly for you, you want to have a transformation, going at it from that perspective, I think is definitely going to get you a lot further.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, it was, just wanting to tackle my health in a way that I hadn't in some time. I'm
Love that.
recently married. I say recently, we just celebrated our 1 year anniversary.
Oh my gosh,
I've
congratulations.
Oh, thank
Oh.
you. I appreciate that. We just the lifestyle change of being a husband, being a father, like I've put on my dad bod for sure. And wanting to transition from having this dad bod to being a strong, able-bodied man as long as I possibly can is really important to me. And I say that I had a minor back injury that's causing hamstring inflammation, which is
Oh
preventing me from running at the moment, which is my love,
no.
which happens.
Yeah.
But I also know that if I was consuming alcohol, if I was eating the way I had been eating, the inflammation would be a lot worse. I'd be a lot less
Oh yeah.
mobile. Like I worked out at the gym today for 2 hours. So the message I want to make sure people are hearing is if you are struggling with something chronic, whether it's pain or inflammation or fatigue, really you owe it to yourself to just take that look in the mirror, seek out support from somebody like Dr. Ray, and you know, commit to yourself more than anything. It's corny,
Yeah.
but health actually is wealth.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it's so funny you said that. That literally was popped into my head as you were saying that. Yeah, health is the truest form of wealth. I forget who originally said that quote. But it's so true. And I was just talking with my client, the one who's been going through things for 10 years, and she said, in this last year alone, she's been doing a lot of things, not just with me, but she spent,
Hmm.
about 3 grand going, from labs to providers to all the different things. And she said, but for the first time in 10 years, I finally have answers and I finally have a positive direction. And she said,
Yes.
that is a huge weight. And her husband is really kind of bogged down in the numbers. But what we really talked about and reframed was, think about if you kept going with all this chronic stuff she's had going on and things were getting worse and worse and worse, she eventually was going to crash and just not be able, I'm not even joking, not be able to work. Like that is where she was headed in the next 2 years. And
Yeah.
so by finding it, by stopping it in its tracks and now reversing it, just think about, yeah, that 3 grand is a lot, but think about how much of an investment that is in her life, in her
Hmm.
health, in her marriage, for her kids. So yeah, thinking about health as an investment rather than as a just an annoying thing that you have to think about sometimes is always going to treat you better. So yeah, treat yourself.
Well, and even just to drill down on that a bit further, the money up front preventatively is going to save you the hospital visits, the doctor's visits, the medications, the
Oh
side
yeah.
effects from the medications, like all the
Yes.
hidden costs of not dealing with something up front.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly. Yep. Whole food plants can heal. Who knew?
so you read my mind because I was actually going to go into a conversation on nutrition.
Yeah,
You
let's
know,
go there.
we're talking about basically cleaning things up, letting things go that don't serve our bodies. Are there any foods or food groups, I should say, that you recommend above others, whether it be for overall health or for fertility purposes?
Good question. So pretty much any time that you can get whole food plants, that's a huge win. Because in today's day and age, just getting to that is a huge step for a lot of people. So I think that would be more plants and more plants on your plate than anything else that's on your plate. So if you are a meat eater, having that be like 1/4 of your plate and carbs be, 1/4, and then have plants be half. So that's kind of a huge step for a lot of people. And I could probably stop there. But if you're ready for a little bit more, we do know that fiber is so important. And so obviously when you're getting more plants, you're going to be getting more fiber, but having more fiber is really important for fertility as well as for pregnancy both. So it helps the
Mm,
body in both areas. And we know that people who have more fiber are actually less likely to have preeclampsia, which is a hypertensive disease state in pregnancy. And it can essentially be completely prevented by having enough high fiber plants in your diet. So that's just one example of many things that you can do that really hopefully helps show you the importance of doing the shift that Mother Nature knows best. And if you just let her do her thing with all of the phytonutrients and antioxidants, she's going to get in there and help your body heal, because our bodies want to be well. They really, truly do. We just need to give them the building blocks to get to do it.
yeah. What are some of those high fiber vegetables you recommend?
Yeah. So, one great, whenever you're thinking about highly nutritious food, some of the great things that you can do are like a stew. So if you kind of think about the nourishing postpartum meals that are awesome for mothers, that also applies for fertility and for pregnancy. It's all the stages. So if you're, kind of picturing a stew that has, peppers, that has some other awesome ones would be celery, a sweet potato stew, lentil stew, pretty much anything, like all plants. You can't really go wrong with plants. Some people have issues with nightshade, so I will, asterisk the sweet potato. If you have a nightshade issue, then think about that. But pretty much anything that is really nutrient dense, you're gonna win in the long run.
I love that. So here's another question. I know we're getting really specific on foods here. I've heard a lot recently about the amount of protein we consume. Like people that are more athletically inclined have this pressure to eat a lot more protein than maybe those that don't. Is there a right answer? Is there a middle ground? Like, what does that look like for people?
Yeah. So theoretically, you should be getting your pound in body weight at least half of that amount in grams of protein per day for
Wow.
yep. And then it can go up from there depending on how active you are and if you're pregnant, etc. So that can be a lot, especially if you're trying to get it, depending on what you're eating. But if you're trying to get that in fruits and veggies, it can be really difficult. So just there are different things you can do, but meal planning for the week can be really helpful for that.
So following up, you know, I have a 9-year-old. He is an incredibly picky eater,
Ah,
as most 9-year-olds are. Not throwing Tucker under the bus on anything, but I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are okay. This is all well and good. How do I get my kid to eat like this without having to buy a bunch of extra food because he won't eat it? And then I end up making two dinners, losing the
yes,
time, losing the energy,
totally.
and even just getting him to eat anything can be a challenge.
Totally. So there's a couple schools of thought on this. First, I will share. So I have a program that I do for families, and it's like a 6-part series. But the first part, we actually talk about food cravings and teaching your kids about food. So the first piece, and it doesn't really help you because he's 9, but the first piece is actually being a picky eater is learned, unfortunately. And I know there's
Mm,
probably a lot of parents out there who are cringing right now, are like, shoot. But yes, it's true. So whenever our kids are young and we're starting to introduce them to solids, etc., the real trick to it is introduce them to something that they like, and then you try the new thing, and then if they don't like it, go back to the thing that they like, and you just keep doing this over and over, and you show them you show them you eating the food that maybe they don't like, and you just keep going, and eventually they actually will like it. But it's just a numbers game of you have to keep trying, even up to that eighth time, and eventually they will start to like the food. So that's for our listeners who are maybe gearing into the starting their family phase. So that's helpful for them. But for everyone else who maybe already has some kiddos, one of the great things that you can do is when you're introducing new foods, you can have something that they like, just kind of like with the infants. You can have something that they like, but just at a smaller portion, and then have the other thing, and kind of slowly be changing that ratio. So maybe initially have it be smaller. And it's really difficult because in today's day and age, depending on what your beliefs are, some people go off of the clean your plate club.
Mhm.
That can be really difficult because that actually teaches kids to ignore their hunger and satiety cues. And so it doesn't allow them to listen to their own body to know when they're full. So that kind of adds this
Interesting.
additional layer of confusion into it. So one of the better things to do to help with that is, one, always let kids fill their own plate instead of you filling their plate, because they're going to naturally have a better understanding of how much they need. And then having food not at the dinner table, but at a different location, so like a serving bar or something. And so that way, once you have what you have, before usually, getting back up to go get more, a couple of minutes pass, and that way you can kind of see, am I still actually hungry? Having smaller dinner plates is also going to help with the portion size control, and then smaller utensils. So, like, always using the smaller dinner fork rather than the bigger dinner fork. It promotes smaller bites, which promotes more chewing and then better digestion. So, all those things are going to help. But having eating healthy be kind of like a game in the house too can really help kids. Now, 9-year-olds, I don't know if he thinks he's too cool for school yet. He might be too old. But sometimes you can make it into a game too. And by having kids be aware of their food and sometimes having them help cook dinner or help pick it out at the store, and getting them involved every single step of the way, can also get them interested in it too, because they're proud of the thing that they made. So maybe having them help the thing that they normally wouldn't eat.
Mhm.
And they might take some pride and actually try it and realize, oh, I actually made this, and it actually looks pretty cool, or I'm proud of the thing that I made. So yeah, those are
I
some
love
fun
that.
tips. Yeah.
I love that. That'll definitely be something we can possibly try. He's
Yeah.
pretty curious by nature, not adventurous at all with eating, but maybe we can shift that a bit. To switch gears entirely, something I wanted to ask is, you've differentiated the difference between fertility and pregnancy, or getting pregnant, in
Yeah.
this conversation. I was wondering if you could explain more the difference in both, and what support looks like in both of those endeavors.
Yeah. So for couples who are either already trying to conceive or are gearing up to conceive, the support for that looks like, well, at least working with me, we have a whole online course suite of all of the natural and behavioral and lifestyle changes that you can do and your spouse can do to help promote natural fertility, to help boost your fertility naturally. And in at Legacy Pregnancy, everything is always about couples. Some places they kind of hone in on just the female and they kind of forget about the men. And that is such a loss, because the newest numbers that just came out, unfortunately, male infertility factor might be responsible for up to 60% of infertility issues. And
Wow.
yeah, so it's a lot. It depends on which study you look at and which numbers, but one of the newer ones shows that it could be that high. And female alone was 20%, and then the remaining is the combined. So at Legacy, I always like to focus on both. And so whenever I work with couples, it depends on, I have a couple of different ways to work with me, but we'll just talk about one-on-one coaching. So they get to watch the online courses at home in their jammies, and there's kind of like a set pace of when they go through them. And then we also do our Voxer coaching, which is just a messaging system and a voice messaging system where we go back and forth and ask questions in between our coaching sessions. And then we always have our coaching sessions and we go over individual goals. We go over couple goals, which are always my favorite. I'm so excited. My most recent couple, they're actually doing their couple goals for forever. Like they've had that. They loved it so much. And so that's really fun. So it's always cool to see the changes that happen. So that's a huge part. And then the rest of the sessions usually look like going over burning questions, or what are your sticky points? What are some of the things that you're trouble with implementing? Or if, depending on what stage they're in their fertility journey, they might have labs that they are going over and that we go over together. As I kind of mentioned before, I usually will go over them long in depth before we meet, do a video for them, they get to watch, and then we go over, hey, here are some of the steps that you can do. Basically all the health and wellness things they can do to help get back on track. And a huge part of what I do, and my most recent clients said that this was probably the most memorable and helpful thing that they weren't expecting, but is self-advocacy. So whether or not that's in their jobs, which actually was a part of it, but also with their medical provider. And this is an unfortunate situation. Yeah. I have yet to see someone's labs of where I haven't found something that was not discussed with them by their provider. So, and usually they're pretty big things. So in this case, unfortunately, so you may or may not have heard of PCOS and how high testosterone is known as a fertility killer. And unfortunately, in this situation, the quote unquote fertility expert that they were working with was prescribing testosterone to the patient, and this patient had normal testosterone levels before it was prescribed. And the reason of prescription was to cure infertility. After being prescribed the testosterone, this client was then too high for testosterone, well over the accepted high range limit for years. And you can imagine the problems that ensued from that. Sure. And so we were able to go over the labs, go over everything, and then literally had step-by-step appointments in practice of here, the questions to ask your provider. And, so if your provider asks this, we kind of role play and go back and forth, because the couple was so worried about this, because when you meet with a provider, sometimes they can get kind of defensive if they think that you are disagreeing with their diagnosis or with their practices. And so that was the case. And so we did a lot of practice, and they did an amazing job. They learned how to do it. And, as you learn, I know you know this as a life coach and as a health and wellness coach, you learn how to ask things and say things and phrase things that aren't going to come off as aggressive. And so that's a huge piece of what we did. We literally wrote down how to ask what it was. And in that appointment, sure enough, the provider did become very aggressive. They actually had to try it twice, because the first time it just didn't go over too well. So they tried it a second time. And after, asking the questions of, well, can you explain why we're on this? Because, as far as we understand, for fertility, high testosterone is not, so they walked it through. And by the end, the provider was actually agreeing with them and agreed that she needed to come off of it. And so that was a huge win. So self-advocacy and learning how to do that is just a huge part of what we do together. And it turns out, now that we're a few months past, she was having periods that were 60 plus days long. They're now regular. Cycle. They're now regular. They're no longer painful. She now has great cervical mucus, and all of her fertility numbers are within normal range. So it's like, so that combined with all the coursework and everything else, which they've been doing a ton of work. I just have to say, I have a whole non-toxic course that they went through and did. And so they were doing a lot of work. So I don't want to make it seem like we just did that one thing and magically fixed everything, but they did a lot of deep work and have made so much progress. So yeah, that's one of the more fun things that I get to do. And I know how to help people through that because I literally went through that for 7 years. So I
Mhm.
get what it's like to have a provider who maybe doesn't understand. I wasn't even planning on sharing this, but I will. So I actually experienced obstetric violence a few years ago. This was not too long after my brain injury. And I went to have an IUD placed, and this was long before I knew all the problems with hormonal birth control. And if that's the first you're hearing of it, please contact me and we can talk about it. But there's lots of other options. And so, anyway, it's kind of a long story, but they ended up touching me without permission, and they inserted the wrong IUD, which it was supposed to be the 7 year, not the 5 year. There was all sorts of problems, and it was a terrible experience. And for a long time, I really blamed myself, because you go in and you immediately think, well, it's my fault, and you kind of do that introspection. And after more and more time, I realized, nope, if someone, doesn't ask for permission to go inside you, they don't have permission to go inside you. That's not okay. And, just because they ask permission to go inside you once doesn't mean that they have it throughout the whole appointment.
Mhm.
And so many different things. They don't just get to place a medical device in you without okaying that they are going to
Yeah.
place a different one than was originally. I actually have the paperwork of the one I signed for, and that's not the one that was placed. So it's a whole long thing. I suppose I could go through a lawsuit on that, but that's not really the kind of person I am. But so going through all that, and saying, hey, there's a huge gap between what patients are comfortable with. I think we kind of get the white coat syndrome, and when we're sitting down and they're standing up, there's that power difference, and they have all of the power in that. And especially as women, a lot of us are taught to sit still and look pretty when you're growing up, and to not make a fuss and all that kind of thing. And so that really breeds for poor situation when you are an adult and you need to advocate for yourself. And I'm not saying that all situations are terrible and all providers are terrible. I want to make that clear. There are some amazing providers out there. But I just want other women to know who have gone through something like this that you deserve to be treated better. And they should always ask for permission multiple times. And that if you are having trouble advocating for yourself, it could be because of the provider that you're working with. And there are other providers that are out there that maybe are more aligned with what you need, and maybe a switch is good. Because the couple that I worked with, it took her plus her husband being in the appointment, both trying to advocate. And that's a lot. You shouldn't need a second person in there to help advocate for you. So sometimes our system is a little bit backwards. But all that to say that you deserve support, and if you need help learning how to be your own advocate, that's also something that I can help you with.
Wow. And first of all, I just want to acknowledge you and thank you for opening up about that and sharing that experience. I mean, folks, like if you feel like you are not being heard, not being respected, if your consent is not being honored, that's obviously important thing to look at. Please, 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 please reach out to somebody who can support you with going over your rights as a patient as necessary. And even in some situations, find a second opinion if you can. When I was going in for my last round of back surgeries, the first guy I saw wanted to fuse me. And,
Wow.
at the time I was 28 years old and I couldn't fathom the thought of being fused for that much longer of my life, theoretically.
Yeah.
And, I got a second opinion. The doctor said, absolutely not. You're 28 years old. Like, that is a horrible decision for you to make.
Ooh, thank
Uh,
goodness for them.
yeah, we're not going to do it that way. But, and again, this is not at all to bash on the traditional medical profession, but they are human beings. They make mistakes. And as a result, y'all, like, we get to advocate for ourselves, what we need, what our bodies need. And, I apologize that you had that experience.
I
But
appreciate that. I'm glad I could share because I actually really wasn't planning on it, but I realized, there's so many out there who experience that and they just put it in the back of their brain. They don't want to think about it because it's really uncomfortable and they feel ashamed about it. And that's shame is so powerful. And so I hope that if you're out there and and that's hitting home for you, just know that you're not alone. Know that
yeah,
people are here. I mean, reach out. Even Stu would love to talk to you. I would love to talk to you. Whatever you've got, just know you're not alone.
yeah, and we'll also provide some resources in the notes section of this episode as well if you feel like there's anyone you need to talk to for a situation like that, if that has been your experience and your personal health journey. So, Dr. Rae, this has been an amazing conversation, and I think we could easily make this episode just hours long if we just kept going, because there are so many avenues that we did not take this conversation that we absolutely could. And, I think I want to just ask you this. Is there something that men and women can do right now to increase their overall health, but also, because it's your area of expertise, their fertility and likelihood of pregnancy?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that you could do today, there's a lot of different things, but we just saw an interesting study on sleep and men not getting good sleep 2 nights in a row plummeted their sperm counts. And
Wow.
so, yes. So I would say a huge thing is trying to work on sleep. So if sleep is not already a priority for you, yes, there's a ton of things you can do, but if sleep is not already a priority for you, I would make that number one.
I love that. I love that. And it's amazing how often everything comes back to sleep and nutrition.
Yes. Yes, and women getting to bed by 9. I know yep, peak hormone production is from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., and it doesn't happen if you aren't asleep at that time, so that's also really important.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
So, y'all, this has been another amazing, amazing episode. I'm blessed, feeling blessed that Dr. Rae was able to make it on the show this week. And for sure, please reach out to her if you would like support with anything we discussed today. She's
Absolutely.
obviously the expert. I'm not, but what are the best ways for people to get in touch with you so that they can learn more about you, what you're up to, and hopefully get their journey started?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram all the time. So if you're on Instagram, my handle is at legacy_pregnancy. And then if you aren't on Instagram, you can always check out my website, which is just legacypregnancy.com, or you can feel free to email me. My email is Rachel L. Dahn, which is spelled DAHN at gmail.com. Or you can just shoot me a text 608-669-3839. However you want to get in contact with me, I'm there.
And we will for sure have all of that information made readily available in the notes section and anywhere else you find this episode posted. So, Dr. Rae, the final question I want to ask you, I ask it of all of my guests. What are you acknowledging yourself for today?
Oh, Hmm. I think I'm just going to acknowledge being in my feminine energy today. I told you earlier before the podcast started, I got my clean on. I got my deep clean on. And it felt so satisfying. It's so good. And I think sometimes we kind of like, I don't know, rear against our gender stereotypes and things. But today I was really enjoying getting to be in my feminine power. So for me, my femininity today.
I dig that. I love that. And you never know how good you can feel after you clean a room, like get rid of
It's awesome.
clothes that you
Yeah.
don't wear, like whatever the thing is. So
Yes, clearing the energy for sure.
I love that. Well, Dr. Rae, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's an absolute pleasure. Definitely going to want to have you on again in the future.
Oh, I would love that.
And folks, for those of you who listened, thank you for being here. This has been your host, Stuart Cranes. This has been your Inside Track to Success. Again, please share, please subscribe, please rate this 5 stars if you are listening to this on Spotify. It just helps it become more relevant in the search functions. And as always, we will be back next week with another message or inspiring guest to help you up level your life. See you then.